And now Corinne is here, so we're 12, so.
So this is we're going to call to order the Minneapolis Advisory Committee on Housing meeting for October 14th of 2021. Kelly, would you mind taking the roll?
I would love to. Corinna Bowler.
Here.
Thank you. Bruce Brunner.
Here.
Joey Dobson.
Here.
Colleen Ebinger.
Here.
Chloe Jackson. Spolinski Jaycox. Queen Kimmons.
Present.
Charlotte Kinsley.
Here.
Diana Latron Garcia.
Here.
David McGee. Lisa Mears. Melissa Newman. Colleen O'Connor Toberman.
Here, I apologize. I'll have to log off around 4:15 for a work conflict.
Okay, thank you. Maggie Ott.
Here.
Pat Schaefer.
Here.
Janine Seja.
Here.
Cecil Smith. Rose Tang.
Hello?
Oh, Cecil, that's you?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Rose Tang.
I'm here.
Annie Wells. There are 13 present. I don't know if anybody, I heard a few dings and I didn't see if other people got admitted who are committee members that joined after everybody in the room and admitted. Anybody on the phone that I didn't get? Okay, all right, 12 people.
Great, thanks, Kelly. And next on our agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
This is Charlotte. I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Thank you, Charlotte.
This is Bruce. I second.
Great. Kelly, would you mind taking the vote, please?
Not at all. I'm not as efficient as Katie, but I'll give it my best. Coroner Bowler.
Aye.
Bruce Brunner.
Aye.
Joey Dobson.
Aye.
Colleen Ebinger.
Aye.
Chloe Jackson. Linsky Jaycox. Queen Kimmons.
Aye.
Charlotte Kinsley.
Aye.
Liliana Latron Garcia.
Aye.
David McGee. Lisa Mears. Melissa Newman. Colleen O'Connor Toberman.
Aye.
Maggie Ott.
Yes.
Scott Schaefer.
Aye.
Janine Seja.
Yes.
Cecil Smith.
Aye.
Rose Tang.
Here.
Annie Wells.
Sorry, I meant yes.
Yes to Annie Wells.
No, sorry. Yes to vote. I just said it here, but I meant yes. I apologize.
All right. There are 13 approving the agenda.
Thank you. And last of our starting the meeting to-dos here is the acceptance of the minutes. So do I have a motion to accept the minutes from the September meeting?
Second. Queen.
Queen, do you want to make that? But we actually need the motion first.
I make a motion that we accept the adoption of the minutes.
Great, thank you.
This is Aliana. I'll second.
Kelly, would you mind taking the vote?
I will do it. Yes. Corinne Bowler,
Aye.
Bruce Brenner,
Aye.
Joey Dobson,
Aye.
Colleen Ebbinger,
Aye.
Chloe Jackson, Linsky Jaycox, Simmons, Queen.
Yes, aye. Sorry about
Thank you. No worries. Charlotte Kinsley,
Aye.
Liliana Latran Garcia,
Aye.
David McGee, Mears, Alyssa Newman, Colleen O'Connor Toberman,
Hello.
Colleen O'Connor Toberman,
Aye. There we go. Sorry, computer trouble.
Maggie Ott,
Yes.
Scott Schaefer,
Aye.
Janine Seja,
Yes.
Cecil Smith,
Yes.
Liz Tang,
I missed the meeting, so I was going to abstain if you have enough people to abstain.
Okay, we do. Annie Wells, Annie, Annie, are you still here? Hold on, let me see if I have enough then, Rose, if Annie's dropped.
I think we just need a simple majority. We don't need a, oh, are you wondering if we still have a quorum to continue? For this vote to carry, we just need a simple majority.
Okay, and I think we do, because I think we still have majority or a quorum.
Great.
Is that confirmed?
Yep, there's
Kelly?
11. Yeah, there's 11 who voted aye, accepted the minutes, and Rose abstained, and Annie, I don't know, must have dropped the call. So, but we have enough to pass the motion, so. And we still have a quorum, so. I think David McGee might have also joined the meeting. David, did you join? Okay, thank you.
Right.
All right.
Well, victories. Moving through the adoption of the agenda and acceptance of minutes. Great. So next on our agenda is our committee's public comment opportunity. The Advisory Committee on Housing sets aside 10 minutes on each of our agendas to hear public comments from non-committee members. We ask that each person making a comment try to keep their remarks to 1 minute, and all comments should be related to housing issues in the city of Minneapolis and, when possible, related to items on the committee's agenda for this meeting. We do take notes on all public comments, and we discuss them as they relate to our other agenda items. And city staff or committee leadership will follow up with any person who made a comment if a need for a reply is identified. So if anyone is present today and ready to make a public comment, please unmute yourself by pressing *6 and state your name now. We will then call on individuals to make their 1 minute comment. So again, that is *6 to unmute.
Patrick.
Someone speaking?
Patrick Esther.
Sorry, can you say your name a little bit louder, please?
Patrick Esther, E-S-T-E-R.
Got it. Thank you. Yes, go ahead. What's your comment? Thank you for joining us today.
Housing for lower income families in North Minneapolis. How can we get more affordable housing for lower income families that's moving here into the city and for families that's here in the city?
And how to get more lower income housing or more affordable housing for lower income households, particularly in North Minneapolis.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you for that. So we're not necessarily able to answer that question comprehensively, though we do have on our agenda today a discussion of the 2022 city budget, which will include specifically items around affordable housing within the city. And we also have a second part of a discussion on homeless youth, which is separate, but maybe a bit related. So those are some items that will be on our agenda today that sounds like relevant to your question. But what I'm really hearing is your emphasis and statement that that's a really important priority for this committee to be considering. So thank you for that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here today. Is there anyone else who's here to make a public comment? Reminder to hit *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, last chance if you'd like to make a public comment. Hit *6 to unmute and go ahead and share your comment with us. All right, I'm not hearing any other comments, so we will keep for the record the comment that was made and move on to the next part of the agenda. Moving into some of the updates. Joey, why don't you lead us in the next section?
Sure. Yeah, so we have a handful of updates we wanted to share on things that our committee has discussed in previous meetings and things that have kind of new city council developments. I'm not sure. I think I saw Andrea was on the call. I don't know, maybe between Andrea and you, Colleen, actually, if between the two of you, a little update on just where things are at with rent help and the zero balance project. Not to put you both on the spot. I know Katie's not here, so she often does a better job coordinating who's giving what updates, but I'm hoping between the two of you, you can share a little update.
This is Andrea. Yeah, I think I would love to defer to Colleen if that's at all possible.
Yes,
because I don't have particularly current information.
Yeah, and Andrea Inouye is typing right now, it looks like, so she might also be able to.
Yeah, Andrea Inouye from the mayor's office.
Oh, okay.
No, but it's confusing when we have multiple. I'm on here with another Colleen, so I agree, it gets confusing. Andrea, why don't you start and then I can next.
Sure. In Minneapolis, as I think we've talked about before, renters who are in need of emergency rental assistance can participate in the statewide application process through Rent Help MN, and the city of Minneapolis is participating in that with our local allocation as well. Through that process, applications are either processed by the state, the county, or the city. So in that case, because of the way the federal program is working, there's ability to spend both the city's allocation and some of the county's allocation and some of the state's allocation in Minneapolis, which is good news for us in terms of having enough resources to try to meet the need that's out there. In Minneapolis, we are really increasing our pace that we're doing through Rent Help MN. We've been increasing almost double month over month the amounts that we're getting out the door. So as of about a week ago, we had in Minneapolis alone from our allocation. So not all the Minneapolis renters that have been helped, but just the ones that our Minneapolis money has helped was about $7 million just on the Rent Help MN side. So we are still getting new applications in all the time, trying to process through those as quickly as possible. So just really encourage people to continue to apply for that assistance so that people can be achieve the protection that still exists in eviction court for having a pending application. and while we're waiting for the processing to happen and ultimately to get that back rent paid. So folks are eligible, as a reminder, for up to 15 months of assistance for rent and utilities. Soon we'll be moving into the second phase of funding, and that will increase that amount to 18 months, which will be helpful for some people who've hit that cap already. So we're really deep in the implementation phase at this point, where we got our system up and running, and it's running better and faster all the time, and trying to get caught up with the influx that came in right at the beginning. And then Minneapolis also participates in the Zero Balance Project, which Colleen can give a little bit of an update on. And that is a landlord initiated process where the landlord starts the application and the renter does have to do some participation there as well. But that's also funded with that same federal resource.
So as Andrew said, the Zero Balance Project is just the kind of the flip on Rent Help MN. The tenant initiates the application and then the landlord has to add the documents afterwards. On Zero Balance, it's the flip. So the landlord initiates and provides as many documents as they can, including the lease and property records, and then the tenant has to still do their income verification and then there's sort of a test and actively participate and say that they want to be part of the program. So as of last week, we had assisted more than 2,200 households. That's across the counties of Dakota, Hennepin, and Ramsey counties, and the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. So 2,200 households, and have expended 16 million of the 33 million that we've got budgeted in this particular allocation. Most of the average payment amount is between $7,000 and $8,000 per household. And we're, I think, proud to say we've been moving applications through pretty quickly. So I think at this point, our average time from submission to approved is about 2 days. And we are issuing checks within about 2 days after the approval. So trying to get money out the door pretty quickly and get those approvals done. And then in, just recently, and I think it was late September, the U.S. Treasury provided new guidance to states and cities and local municipalities around the country to encourage faster expenditure of these dollars, and expressed, I think, great frustration with really most of the states and cities and counties being slower than what they wanted in terms of expending. So they provided guidance to try to make the application process faster. And so we've implemented most of those guidelines. So that includes proxy zip codes. So we've been targeting the 23 zip codes in the region that have average income that's at or below 50% area median income. That means if you live in that income, if you live in one of those zip codes, a renter does not have to submit income documentation. They still do need to attest that in fact their income meets the guidelines, but they don't have to upload any particular documentation for that. We've also been allowing tenants to verbally attest to their income qualification to one of our reviewers, and then the reviewer can provide that documentation that they have heard that. So rather than requiring an attestation that is written down and then uploaded, which can again be a barrier, they can just do it over the phone. We've tried to simplify the application language just to make it easier to read and more understandable. And then we, I think pretty early on, did implement a prospective rent feature. So people can apply not just for back rent, but also for 3 months of prospective. And then we added a feature that once, if you applied for 3 months of prospective in July, you'd be coming up at the end of those 3 months. And so those households receive an automatic email prompt asking if they want to request an additional 3 months. And so that's not quite automated. They still have to do some things, but it's intended to be pretty, hopefully pretty easy. And so we're seeing by and large people generally taking that up and requesting the additional 3 months to move forward again. So again, I would just say, echo exactly what Andrea said, that if you yourself need rental assistance, need help, please do apply, because it is a really significant resource. There is still a lot of money available, and the intent is to stabilize households, stabilize homes and housing. So please do apply or share the information with others.
I also just wanted to give the opportunity to pass the mic to Aliana if she wants to add anything, since Clues is one of our providers for the Minneapolis program for rent help side. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add, but just wanted to give you the chance.
The only thing that I will add is we are trying to expedite every single application. The process itself is complex, so it takes a little bit more time to process it from our end, especially when there's a language barrier, and help the community to understand the process and the documents that we need and get the engagement from the landlord. So we're going performing a little bit better, that's for sure.
Thanks to all of you for the work on your various kind of aspects of getting those dollars to the families who need them. I see Bruce, I've got a couple of hands. So Bruce, what was your question?
It's not really a question, it's just a comment, because
Sure.
as a housing provider, I'll say I've gone through 2 of these, and the last one, which was a couple of weeks ago, was extremely seamless, very quick approvals, and received the money very quickly to alleviate the burden that this person had. So I've been through several cycles of this, going back a year, and it's very smooth. Just compliments.
Thank you, Bruce. Can you, just for us, so we can know who to give the kudos to, were you participating on the rent help side or on the zero balance side?
Zero balance.
Thanks.
I found that's much quicker, because there is a lot of confusion, and when the residents have to pull everything together, it's often overwhelming to them. So.
Great, thanks Bruce for chiming in with your experience. And Charlotte, go ahead.
Yeah, that was actually, I was kind of along the same lines. I was curious, and I'm sorry if I missed this. Colleen, you talked about the like shifts to do like you call them proxy zip codes. Is that something that Rent Help MN can do as well, or is doing as well? Already doing? Can you just speak to that? Sorry, and sorry if you've already said.
Yeah, no, we didn't. So Rent Help MN has also taken up that guidance and has made some recent changes to the application to make that. So I would say that on the processing side of Minneapolis, we started accepting those proxy zip codes, but it took a little while for the technology to catch up to for the application to be updated to make it a little bit more intuitive. That's what you can do, and that you can rely on that. So those updates, there have been some updates made there, and continuing to try to make that process. Minnesota Housing drives that part of it, the updates to the application. But we are continuing both through the application and then through our processing side to try to incorporate all of the flexibility that Treasury is giving us as new guidance comes out.
Great, thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing any other hands. So I might just move us to the next piece, since it's related, and we were just gonna make sure everyone on the call was kind of up to speed with where we're at with the off-ramp. I know this has been talked about probably in a lot of our spaces, but as of October 12th, Tuesday, all of the protections of the off-ramp have expired, except for, which I think Colleen referenced earlier, eviction cases only for non-payment of rent should not be filed and cannot proceed if the tenant has a pending pending application through one of the based assistance programs. And that is not my dog, but I'm not sure someone else, just not that it matters, but somebody's maybe got some barking going on, just fine. So just wanted to make sure everyone kind of knew where we're at. I'll share, as a tenant attorney at Legal Aid, we are seeing case filings increase as we expected, and we expect that trend to continue. One thing that I think is just really important from sort of a messaging standpoint, something that we're hearing, the way that this last piece is being talked about, is that if a tenant or a family has a pending application, then they cannot be evicted. That's sort of legally true, or that's how it should work, but we are seeing a lot of defaults, meaning a lot of folks not showing up for court. And so there is some concern that people think that if you have that pending application, then you don't need to go to court, and but unfortunately, if you don't show up for court, and the landlord doesn't know you have submitted an application or doesn't share that with the court has no way of knowing that. It's not like they're not at this point getting that information from, you know, Minnesota Housing or a different agency. So I just wanted to share that for folks who are, you know, generating messaging or talking with folks who might be, you know, have an eviction filing or a pending application, that folks still need to come to court in order to kind of assert that they have that application pending and to truly be protected from that eviction case. So I just wanted to share that. Another thing that's happening in Hennepin County Housing Court, there are folks from Hennepin County, but also from the state who are available for tenants to get applications in really quickly while they're sort of at virtual Zoom court. And they're available for legal services providers like myself and my colleagues to do kind of really quick, real-time application status checks. But I can only help where our team can only help and prevent that eviction if we have a client there, if we have, you know, somebody there to talk to. So just get that message out. Even though you should be protected under the law, it is only applies to non-payment of rent cases, not for breach of lease cases or holdover cases. And you still need to show up for court if you are facing an eviction. So does anyone have anything that they want to add about the off-ramp, or questions or comments about kind of the intersection of the eviction moratorium off-ramp and rental assistance right now?
This is Queen. I would like to add, so I have a group of about 40 people, and I would like, if I remember in the summer, I partnered with an agency, and I don't know if it was Minnesota Legal Aid or which one, but I would like to do another Zoom forum so that I can get the word out about services, and also try to get as many people to get the word out about what you guys do and how, if they show up to court, that they can get some help. I think that a lot of people are just overwhelmed. Myself, I had COVID and pneumonia. And so I was overwhelmed with, you know, what do I do? You know, how do I, you know, stay up abreast on my rent or what have you? And I think that that would be helpful, and I would be open to doing that through One Family, One Community. So if you would like to get that information, anybody on this line would like to get information to the community, I would be grateful to set up some Zoom or some in-person meetings, 6 feet social distancing and mask, of course, but just, 30 minutes or so of information to communities, because I think that that's very important, is so that they can have some engagement and just some information so that they will be more informed about how they can get some help. Thank you, and I'll recuse myself.
Thanks, Queen. This is Joey speaking, but I or one of my colleagues would be more than happy to come to, whatever you set up, whether it's virtual or in person, to give some of that legal advice and information for tenants. So please feel free to reach out to me and anyone else on this group who you might think would be helpful. Great idea. Any other questions or comments or thoughts on this?
Can I just add to Queen? I'd be happy to follow up too. We have housing assistance navigators that we've contracted with at the city that can also participate in that kind of an event. I know Charlotte from MPS recently had an event, and we connected her with some of our navigators who were able to come and give information about how to do the application itself as well. So I'd be happy to make that connection.
And also, Queen, wonderful. I hope you're feeling better. That sounds horrible. Sorry, I was just going to say.
I was overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed. I'm still on the oxygen machine. But if I could get Kelly or Kate or somebody to just pass my information and someone shoot me an email, I will try to set up something at a hub or at UROC, and we will get, believe me, residents will come in to find out about that information, because they call. I get at least 30 to 40 calls a day about help with rent, or I'm being evicted. And so it would be wonderful to have some sort of something to give the people in this area. And I'm over north, and I'm sure they would greatly appreciate it as I do right now. Thank you.
Yeah, Queen, as soon as you have something, you know, we'll communicate, or Katie and I will, you know, connect and make sure Joey and others are available. So.
All right.
Joey, I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Do you have a sense of what you're seeing in terms of people showing up or not showing up for those Zoom court? Can you give us a sense of what's happening?
Yeah, this over the past week or so, there's 15 to 20 cases on each calendar, each kind of group calendar. And it's been anywhere from like 2 to 5 out of those 15 to 20 families. Every day there's been like 2 to 5 families who didn't show up. And we don't know, right? It's possible that they moved out and they just decided to move out and move on, but we don't know what's going on with them. So we are making some efforts through the agency we're sending them their names so that they can see if they're in their system, in the rent help system. And if they are, we're reaching out to see if we can reach them. There are, in some cases, legal steps that we can take to stay the writ, to get the writ paused if they do indeed have a pending application and they should be getting that protection. But it's really hard, and if that's the case, we need to act really fast, and it can be hard to reach people. So it's obviously much, much better, if at all possible, for people to just show up. All right, so I think I'll move us along. Let's see, the next update we have is on the right to counsel ordinance that we discussed last week. I think I see Robin, you're here, right? Would you mind just giving the brief update on right to counsel if you're here?
Yes, I'm here.
Great.
Thanks very much, Joey. Yes, the right to counsel ordinance did pass the council last cycle. It passed unanimously. And we will now just be having conversations as part of the 2022 budget, and you know, the ARPA federal funding, to make sure that we actually put the money where the council's mouth was.
That's a little sneak preview maybe for part of our budgeting conversation later in this meeting about housing priorities in the ARPA and 2022 budget. So just wanted to give that update since we did discuss and take a position as a committee on that last time. The next update is just, I guess, kind of a reminder. I think there's some spaces I've been in and others, for some, they're just making sure people know about the election coming up. Sorry, I'm struggling to find my words. But there's an election coming up, as we all know, and there's some housing. There's the rent stabilization charter amendment on the ballot, and of course, the city council members and the mayor. So we just wanted to put that out there. And I'm not sure, I think the city has a pretty good website for voting information, but obviously with COVID and everything, even just how we vote looks a little bit different for a lot of people. But there will be, my understanding is there is in-person voting, but there's also, you can request an absentee ballot. I think the recommendation I think I saw was do that a couple weeks before the election. So for folks who are wanting to request that, it's probably good to get that request in now. And then there's also early in-person voting. So I don't know if there's anyone on the call who wants to just share anything about the election or things that they want to make sure are known or resources. If not, that's okay, we can move on, but just wanted to provide that space.
This is Queen again. I also want to add that vote early is great. Like I voted early this year, and it was at our new office right off of Hennepin. And it was like, you know, I hadn't voted in a while. I just needed to have my ID. That was it. And I am so grateful that I was able to take advantage of that opportunity, and also that they have that vote early piece in Minnesota. So that was good for me. Oh, I recused myself.
Great, thanks, Queen. That's good to know. Anything else on that, or any other kind of brief updates for the committee? All right, so I think that's it for updates. And then our two discussion items for today are finishing our youth homelessness discussion from last meeting. I'm again want to apologize that we weren't able to finish that or have real time for discussion on that at our September meeting. So we'll start with that, and then afterward we will have that conversation about the budget. So I'm not sure who's where we left off or who's taking it over, but
I could start with the MPS information, and then I know we did kind of have to rush. So happy. And how much time should I spend on this? I just want to make sure I'm.
Yeah, I don't know, Maggie or Scott, do you have kind of a rough sense what you think you might want or need for the budget conversation?
Pulling a number out of the sky, half an hour, maybe?
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
Okay, so if we haven't transitioned to that by 4:30, let's do that. Obviously, if we finish sooner, that's fine, but we'll plan to transition to the budget conversation at 4:30 if we haven't yet.
Okay, yeah, I definitely will not take that much time. And Lisa, I don't think Lisa is on, right?
I'm not.
I know we did have to kind of rush on her part, so if she hops on and wants to jump in, I definitely won't take that whole chunk of time. And is it okay if I share my screen? Okay. So I work for Minneapolis Public Schools. I'm the homeless and highly mobile manager. And I thought what I would do with our time today is just talk a little bit about what we're seeing at MPS with our students experiencing homelessness, talk a little bit about that, and then spend a little bit of time on Stable Home, Stable Schools, which is an initiative, a housing initiative that we have. So let me just share my screen here. Let's see, are you all seeing my PowerPoint here?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, great. So I'll start here. This is our total numbers of students that we identified as experiencing homelessness last school year. I will just, a caveat here is almost all districts saw a major decrease in their number of students identified during COVID and distance learning. In part, we think because of the eviction moratorium, and in part because we were missing students because of the distance learning. So, and it's very hard to say how much is each of those categories. So we were typically around, at our highest, we've been closer to 10% of our student body with an experience of homelessness in a given year. More recently, it's been more like 7 or 6, and now this is the lowest we've seen in quite a while at 4.4%. Couple things I would point out. You can see the two different numbers here. So this blue circle with the about 2,400, that includes all the students that we identify. So we work in the shelters. I have a team of people that office out of People Serving People and regularly are connecting with Mary's Place and other shelters. And so we touch students that might not be MPS enrolled, but are experiencing homelessness. So we do track that. So that's the blue number. Minneapolis Public Schools enrolled students is that yellow number there. So about 1,500 students that we identified last year. Couple other things that I would point out, if you look at the race and ethnicity, definitely a disproportionate impact on our Black and Indigenous students in particular. I don't need to tell you all, a long history of racist housing practices kind of got us to where we are today. But that we definitely see that disproportionality in our rates every year. You also see a higher number at the younger ages, which I think any of you who have had to pay for childcare understand how childcare can impact your ability to afford housing. And the other thing I would point out is if you look at the far right, the location when identified, we had an increase in our number of doubled up students that were identified versus our number in shelters. So our shelter numbers have been lower than we've seen previously, historically low, and our doubled up numbers went up. So I think that's also, I think lots of different factors, but one is during a pandemic, people did not want to go to congregate setting shelters and stayed in doubled up situations, maybe longer than they would have otherwise. I'm going to pause here for any questions on the data or on these numbers. Okay.
I have a quick question. So of
Yeah.
the folks who aren't in your public schools, are they kids in school, not in school, older youth?
Good question. It's kids who are maybe not school age yet, kids who are staying in one of the shelters we're working with, but are going to a suburban school or a charter school, variety of things, but under 18 is who we would be tracking with that number. Good question.
Thanks.
Any other questions? All right, and I'm just going to keep going, so I won't pause for questions every time. So please just jump in and interrupt me if you have a question or raise your hand. I also wanted to just compare sort of like at this time of year, October, and show you what we're seeing. So these numbers here compare the week of October 8th from the 2019-20 school year, last school year, and then what we're seeing this school year. And so you'll see that major dip during our year of distance learning. And then you can see that it's starting to come back up. So just for your information, we are starting to see numbers rise a bit. It's very hard. There's so much we don't know about how the eviction moratorium lifting is going to play out. There's a lot of unknowns, and there's a lot of unknowns for us academically too. We didn't get academic measures on a lot of our students last year during distance learning. So I think we're going to be learning a lot about the impact over time. Just a really quick, all students experiencing homelessness are covered by the federal McKinney-Vento law, which maintains that a student experiencing homelessness has the same right to education as a stably housed student. So there are rights that follow that student regardless of what school they're in. And some of those rights include being able to attend the same school that they attended before they became homeless. So that means a lot of transportation across cities, across district boundaries to maintain that stability for the student. So if it's in the student's best interest to stay, it doesn't matter where they had to move to because of homelessness. We are responsible to transport them back to their same school so they can maintain that stability. And those rights last to the end of the school year in which they became homeless. So even if they, find stable housing, say they're homeless in October and November and they find housing in December, they can still stay at that school for the duration of the year, regardless of where they found their stable housing. And now I'm going to shift into stable homes, stable schools, unless folks have questions. Stable homes, stable schools is a partnership with the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority, the City of Minneapolis. The YMCA is our contracted services provider, and Hennepin County is also a partner. And so these entities have come together to sort of provide rental assistance and eviction prevention support for students in our MPS schools with the highest rates of homelessness. So these are the sites that are included in stable homes, stable schools. These sites represent 75% of our, we call it HHM, homeless highly mobile. So our HHM population, 75% of the elementary age students who are experiencing homelessness attend one of these schools. And so that's why those schools were chosen as the referring sites. There's two types of assistance that folks can get through stable homes. One is ongoing rental assistance. This is definitely the part of the initiative that is maybe most sought after because of the lack of ability for people to find affordable housing. So this is for folks who are experiencing homelessness and who need some support to move out of that homelessness. So it's a 3-year program. We're actually looking at and working through a 4th-year extension of that program, given all the pandemic implications for families. Schools refer based on the students at their site that need it the most. And I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. But we're prioritizing. We definitely don't have enough spots for every student at each school that would be eligible. But we're releasing those referrals as the program is able to take them in. The second part is our housing stability. So that's our eviction prevention. So that's one-time assistance. We've kind of done some expansion where you can get it a second time given COVID, and we've lifted our limits a bit. So we've done some shifting around that to respond to the need. But that is intended for folks who are housed or who have a housing that they can afford and just need a damage deposit to get in. And I see Scott, I think you have your hand raised here.
Hi, Charlotte. Yeah, for the rental assistance, I see that under the eligibility section, it says 30 to 50% AMI. Is there really a floor for the assistance? Or I guess an income ceiling, like above which, no, yeah, an income floor below which you're ineligible for the rental assistance.
Oh, like if you had zero income, would you be ineligible?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
No, there isn't a, yeah, so good point. It should probably should not say 30 to 50 then.
Got it, thanks.
So a little bit about kind of what we're seeing in terms of numbers. So this is in terms of the rental assistance. This was our last poll, but I think we're at 97 families that are housed now. That's that pink. So we've got 97 families that are currently housed, around 25 that are out searching, and 5 that are pending an inspection. Definitely the biggest challenge to this initiative is the ability for folks to find affordable housing. So even with the rental assistance, it's very challenging. We have an added sort of challenge in that the goal of this initiative is that folks can stay in their same school in their housing. And so we're looking within a bus zone of a particular school, which can be really small depending on the school. So we're also limited in how we're searching there. This is a little bit about just trying to explain how we prioritize. So because we do not have enough openings for all eligible families, we came up with a system of sort of prioritizing families based on both their housing needs and their academic needs. And that's probably one of the things I appreciate the most about this initiative, is that it's not just looking at, are you homeless right now? And maybe some of the other categories that would prioritize someone for needing assistance, but it's looking at the kids, really specifically at the kids. And we know that homelessness is generational. And so I think it's really important that we're looking at the kids and how is this playing out for the students. So we're looking at things like attendance, parent engagement, literacy scores, behavior needs, where we have a form that we use that kind of helps raise students in priority if they're really struggling to attend school during a period of homelessness. They're a priority for us. We really need to get this family stabilized. So those are some of the considerations that we do. And then we release the referrals to sites based on their numbers of homeless. So if you have a site with a lot of families experiencing homelessness, you're going to receive more referrals in a given year than one of the other sites.
Oh, did you? Oh. Yeah.
And then this is just the housing stability, the one-time assistance. So this again, this is a little bit old, so I think we're actually a bit higher than this now.
Yeah.
But we've released over $600,000, and a lot of that was during the pandemic. So we definitely saw an increase in requests for that support since COVID-19. And I would say one of the things that we've shifted really well with on this is routing people to other forms of assistance. So while rent help is available, if somebody's eligible for that, we're definitely going to support them in that process. It doesn't mean we'll just deny their application. We'll help them get connected so they can do it. But it's been really helpful for us to have that as an option. So we use stable home, stable schools for folks that wouldn't fit in that rent help MN category for whatever reason. And I think that is all I have in terms of sharing slides with you. So I'm gonna pause there for any questions, comments, things you wanted me to spend more time on. Go ahead, Colleen.
I'm curious how this will play into our next discussion about budget. I know that this has been, one of the programs that our committee has enthusiastically endorsed in the past. And so, Charlotte, I'm interested in, do you have any specific recommendations about, what would it take to serve all the families that you would like to be serving through this program? What what does this program need in order to be more successful, being that it seems like, the initial outcomes have had people pretty enthused.
Yeah, thanks. Good question. And I probably should have spent more time on some of the sort of outcomes that we are seeing around it are that the school stability piece is huge. I mean, the percent of students that are staying in their same school that wouldn't have otherwise is absolutely incredible. And we know a lot about sort of academic progress and moving schools. I mean, that's the whole point of the McKinney-Vento Act is we know when kids have to move around a lot, their education is interrupted. So we've had huge success in that area. To your question, it's tricky to answer because I think our biggest barrier right now is housing stock. Like, it's not being able to find the housing for families. So I think that's something that I hope we continue to invest in, expanding access to affordable housing. I think to be able to expand in terms of having like a full team of people to support the housing navigation process could be really useful, because a lot of times, I mean, we've got a lot of families, almost 100 families that are in that. And so you can imagine when we have a lot of folks in that housing search process, because things are so challenging, having more help with that could be really useful. But yeah, the biggest challenge is the housing stock piece. And we have, just so you know, we don't, so if someone's been searching in their bus zone for 90 days and just, we are not making progress, we then go to the family and say, listen, like, we know staying at your school is really important. Do you want to keep searching in this zone, or do we want to open it up knowing that that's going to mean a school switch eventually? We can maintain that stability for the rest of the year, but we do offer that as an option. And families, I mean, you can imagine if you're homeless, even if you really love your school, if you cannot find housing, you're probably going to choose to expand, which I think is one of the challenges and things we should be really upset about in terms of, how we manage for our community members and the lack of ability to stay stable somewhere. Appreciate the question.
Thanks.
Janine?
Sure. You answered part of my question when you spoke to the outcomes. So you mentioned positive academic outcomes. Do you have outcome information in terms of the homelessness itself? Like, is the duration shorter for the families who are assisted versus the ones who didn't get into the program, or any other information like that?
Yeah, good question. So we're actually, we started the initiative, we had one full school year, and then we had COVID. So like in terms of some of our performance outcome measures that we're planning to track are just like very nuanced now. And so I am putting together for a January steering committee meeting, just a lot more details around sort of academic measures, housing stability measures. So I'd be happy to, even if it's just sharing the information out with this committee, I'd be happy to share that. But I will say, absolutely, folks that get into this get housed. And so we can like really clearly point to that this works in terms of getting housing for people. And because we're prioritizing the higher needs families, we really are screening in families that without this support would be really challenged to find something. Another piece to that is that within our like current like system of a homeless response system, our doubled up students aren't actually eligible for coordinated entry. And that was, if you remember, 60% of our student body kind of fell into that category. And it actually mirrors perfectly with, like, that isn't a referral point for us. We take it into consideration, but it's not one of our actual measures. So we really prioritize who's most in need of it academically and the student sort of pieces of that. But 60% of those that are getting referred in are doubled up families also. So not eligible for our homeless response system. So I think that's another thing to point out is like, it's filling a really important niche for us, that our students who are homeless, I will say that over and over again, they are just as homeless as a family that is in shelter, really. And if you're looking at student outcomes, they're just as in need of support and stability as our families who are in shelter as well. So I think it's filling a really important niche there as well. I didn't really answer your question very well, but I can follow up with more specific outcomes when I have that report ready.
Thank you.
This is Queen. I hate to be so vocal. Can I make one small comment about that? So I have this outreach book of the streets outreach, and so on page 20 and page 21, it talks about coordinated entry, and it also talks about that if families are doubled up or people they cannot use coordinated entry services. Is there something this committee could do to work on that? As that I see that as an issue as well. Thank you. I'll recuse myself.
Speaking my language, Queen. Yeah, it's something that I have been talking about for a very long time. There are other communities that include it. So HUD's definition of homelessness, communities can choose to include it. It's like an at-risk category. And some communities do choose to include at risk in their coordinated entry process. The argument that I hear on the other side, which I do understand, is that housing resources are limited, and we really aren't able to even serve those that are currently going into our coordinated entry system, who are sheltered, unsheltered, or in shelter, unsheltered, or in domestic violence shelters. We don't even have enough spots for them. So why would we expand it? I actually don't agree with that argument. I think you can either like define the problem by the solutions that you have available, or you could define the problem and then work to meet that need. I mean, I do understand where people are coming from with that. If we're looking at kids and outcomes, I don't think there's evidence there that that doubled up families should be excluded from our response system. I'm not keeping track of an order of people raising hands here. Joey, I know you've had your hand up for a little while.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, maybe just first, kind of to Queen's point, I mean, so my understanding is that, would that be more county policy, like where the decision making with land, with the county? I know the city has done more with standing up shelters, and shelter is not my area of real expertise, but so to Queen's question about like what could this committee do with, because we advise the city. I don't, yeah, Andrea, I just saw you pop into like, can you just say like to what extent are there Minneapolis decision-making points on shelter access?
Well, I'll just say that the coordinated entry system itself is a Hennepin County run process. So that is the jurisdiction for coordinated entry, that specific function. The city and the county participate collectively in Heading Home Hennepin, which is a collaborative between the city and the county, where we do coordinate our homelessness response in general around shelter and unsheltered homelessness. And so that's a sort of committee body between the two. So for sure, this committee could submit a recommendation to that body, but that would be sort of a general submission of interest in a topic, specifically in terms of who's making decisions about who's in and out in the coordinated entry system. That is under the county jurisdiction.
Okay, thanks. Well, and so, I mean, Queen, and for you and for others who are interested in this, I'm just going to make sure that we make note of that as our committee, that maybe on a future, this is much, I think, meant to be more informative and discussion based, but also, yeah, a way to identify some of the places where our committee could take action or make recommendations. So I'm just going to make note of that, and we can plan to make space for kind of revisiting. Would there be a time that would make sense to provide some comments or some recommendations to the Heading Home Hennepin committee and decision makers? So just know that that is noted and that will be kept and revisited. My other question for you, Charlotte, was just if you're hearing with the search, are you hearing things around the rental protection ordinance around tenant screening that passed a couple years in 2019? Are you hearing screening out? I mean, I know you said that really just there aren't homes that are in an affordable range, that's the #1 problem. I'm wondering if you're also hearing about key reasons why people are being denied.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd be the best person to speak to that. Our Y housing navigators would probably know a lot more than I would about that. So I could certainly take that back to them and just ask what they're hearing and seeing. It's a good question.
I hand out.
Lisa.
Yes, I was just wondering if you could send me some information on the number of families you're seeing doubling up, and we have a wide variety of people on this committee, and if you have anything to do with federal grants, many grants limit are income based, but they look at everybody in the house's income. So when we see families doubling up, they often become ineligible for other services because there's too much income in that household. Whereas if you considered the family units separately, they would both qualify. So that's information I will take and forward up through the grant systems, the federal grant systems that I work with, and I urge other people to also work on getting those rules changed so that we can get the services where they're needed and not assume that because there's 6 earning adults in the household, that could be 3 households combined.
Yeah, I did not know that. What a good point. It's such a double whammy. So not only do you need to have an overflowing household to be able to afford rent, then you're not qualifying for other services. I didn't even think of that. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I'll send you some numbers.
Well, and that could apply to things like heating assistance or weatherization, or in our case, the HUD grants.
Thanks. Janine, I see your hand. Or maybe that was from before.
Yeah, sorry, I needed to lower it. Sorry.
No, you're fine. How about you, Scott? Is that just from before, or do you have another question?
Oh, sorry. Nope, I thought I lowered mine too.
Oh, okay. All right. Great. Well, I really appreciate the time. Oh, was someone saying something?
Yes, this is Karina. I just wanted to mention what I mentioned from the last meeting. We should really also focus on student housing to try to make that a priority because there's so many, youth and young adults that's on the street and also college students. So we should kind of focus on student housing. I think that's a priority that needs to be addressed as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. Tacoma, Washington was a spot that when Stable Home, Stable Schools was in development, we really looked at their model for how they were doing there. It was a school housing partnership similarly, and they have since expanded so that they have an initiative from all the way from pre-K up through college. So they have a Stable Home, Stable Schools for college students. They have, so they kind of have adjusted their model to meet the different stages, with the idea being, let's get folks educated, stable throughout their schooling so that then they can move on and really avoid that cycle of homelessness that can so often happen when children are growing up, having to move around all the time. So thank you for bringing that up. I agree.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Well, I really appreciate the time and attention to our students.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this and obviously for all of your work, but I think this was really helpful. So thank you. And let's obviously, as you identify things that, would be helpful from this committee moving forward, of course, let us know. All right. So I think now we're going to move to our conversation on the budget. I'll pass it over to Maggie and Scott to lead our conversation. I just want to say I'll say it again, but thank you so much to Maggie and Scott for volunteering at our last meeting to do this extra prep work and get us all kind of up to speed so that we're in a place where we can decide if we want to make recommendations. So thank you both for doing that extra work for our committee.
Sure, and I just want to make sure Rose was part of it as well. So you'll hear from all 3 of us today.
Thank you. Sorry, Rose. Thank you too.
All right, so I think I drew the short straw, so I have to start out. So this is, I'm Scott, and this is the our review of the Minneapolis 2022 proposed budget. So first, we just noted, what's proposed in the budget and noted the new or expanded programs. First one was the a new program for $1 million for deeply affordable preservation going to the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority. And that will be both to spur support new development of public housing and preservation and addressing deferred maintenance.
Scott, sorry to interrupt you. Kelly or Tina, was this emailed to, I just want to make sure that the folks on the phone have access to this.
Tina, I don't know, was this, Scott, did you send this to Tina to get sent out with the agenda, or is this new?
No, I sent this as well as the spreadsheet out to Tina. I don't know if it made it to everyone, but I did send it in.
Tina, are you on the call?
I must have missed it. I apologize. I had a lot of emails coming through, so I did not attach this with the agenda.
No worries. It just will need to, Scott, I think when you're talking about it, you'll have to, do what you're doing, speak clearly,
okay.
And then we'll send it out and post it on the website after the meeting.
All right. Yeah, we'll get this distributed and posted to the website, and yeah, I'll make sure that as I'm talking about it, I don't leave anything just sort of on the screen and not unsaid. So that was the first newer expanded program was the MPHA, Deeply Affordable Preservation. The second expanded program that we noted was the Homeowner Rehabilitation. What was it called exactly? Homeowner Rehabilitation Programs, which went up from about 560,000 to 945,000. So about $1 million from the previous year. And then the third one that we noticed was the community engagement specialist, focused on increasing the city's renter communications and community engagement work to ensure that renters have full access to the rights provided under the Renter First renter protections. Maybe I'll go over the next set. Next slide is about the programs where the budget was reduced, and then I can maybe have if there are any questions about, these two slides, we can talk then. So the city has a 4D tax program, which provides a tax break to landlords who agree to provide lower rents for lower income households. And that the budget item was cut by 60% from 250,000 to 100,000. And that was to right size the budget based on actual operating costs. So I guess the program was budgeted for more than they needed, and so it was undersubscribed, and they adjusted it appropriately. Another cut was, a reduction was the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was budgeted for $15.7 million, which is a decrease of about $800,000 from the previous year, and it's been decreasing annually since 2019 high of $20.5 million. And then the third reduction was the Emergency Solutions Grant. And it had received a boost for 2021, the 2021 adopted budget, and because of the pandemic, and then it returned to its pre-pandemic level for the 2022 recommended budget. So at that, are there any questions about the newer expanded programs or the program cuts?
I have a question. So there was $100,000, $150,000 cut because they didn't have enough participants or community engagement on a program. Wow. Is there any way to get do some engagements with that committee?
Yeah, Andrea, are you still on the call? Do you have any background
Yeah,
on
I'm happy to provide some clarity there for 4D. So the situation with 4D is the original budget, as when we create a new program, was an estimate. So we weren't sure how much staff time it was going to take to run that. And we had also some estimates about whether or not there were going to be additional costs beyond the staff time and the filing fees. And so after running the program, so it's not a situation where it's undersubscribed and we're getting more and more people participating in that all the time. It's just really a situation of realizing that that program can be run with the level of staffing that we currently have and with the expenses as proposed in the 2022 budget. So it's not cutting any services. We fully expect people to continue to participate in 4D and to continue to increase participation in 4D. Is really just making sure that it was really just saying we actually can run this on the staff time that we have, and so we don't need to sort of save this extra money in this place that we don't need to use it right now. And if I may also clarify that the Emergency Solutions Grant, that's pass-through money from the federal government, so we don't control how much that is. We would love for that to be higher, and in fact, to be at the pandemic, the corona, both well, CDBG and Emergency Solutions Grant had coronavirus additional allocations from the federal government, which have been really critical in helping us meet needs over the last year, and will continue. We're still using that money to run some of our emergency programming right now, and a lot of the work that's been done in the shelter system and with unsheltered homelessness are supported by those funds that came in extra from the federal government last year.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification, Andrea.
And I was just, the one you haven't weighed in yet on this slide, Andrea, I was just gonna ask if you had more, like what more you would share about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund decrease.
Absolutely. So what we've done with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is and I think we've talked about this maybe in previous years about the balance that the city does between one-time funding and ongoing funding. And so one-time funding is funding that's available from a variety of different reasons, but it's only available like 1 year. Ongoing funding is is essentially part of the tax levy, and that's ongoing funding that's in the ongoing budget. So we have shifted some of the money from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund from one-time to ongoing to the tune of $800,000 a year, so that is ongoing. And then our strategy has been, as we have one-time money available, we want to pump as much of that as we can into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So the high at 2019 is true. That was the high marker. We had more one-time funding available to do that. Partially because of the revenue situation with COVID, we have a lot less one-time funding on hand, and we've had to use that to fill gaps because our ongoing funding has gone down significantly. And so we do continue to want to prioritize the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the work that's being done there. And the other thing I will note is that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is not really a standalone fund. It works in concert with federal and state resources, leverages those funds, and helps fill gaps. So we also try to size it in a way where we can maximize the leverage that we're bringing in and get that out the door. So we take all that, we get some estimates from our housing department experts about what they think in terms of how much can get out the door every year, and we do also take that into consideration. And their recommendation generally is 15 million is where that should be about, between 10 and 15 million is where we should be annually in order to maximize those leverages.
Should we move on to the next slide? Sorry, is this, Scott, were you?
Yeah, I'm handling the slides, so
Oh, you are handling, sorry.
yeah, so I can just yeah, I can just tell me when to go next.
Okay, sorry, didn't mean to step on your toes there. Just here are a list of, this slide is titled Other Questions, and it's a list of other questions that we had about the proposed budget. So one of the items, the first item on here is right to counsel, and we did already cover that earlier in today's discussion, but what we had learned is that there's a current $1.25 million contract that should go through March 2022. That right to counsel is potentially an eligible use of ARPA funds, and we were unclear where this shows up in the budget, but it sounds like the ordinance has made this possible with the language, and that still needs funding to support that. Maybe somebody could correct me if that was not a correct understanding of the conversation. Another thing that we had noted here earlier was the community engagement specialist position. And the question that we had related to this was, will that position be part of neighborhood and community relations, or will it be housed elsewhere? This position, I think we noted earlier, is just more outreach and communication with renters specifically. And then rental housing inspectors, which has been a topic that we've discussed as a committee in the past, and community groups have requested additional funding for rental housing inspectors previously. We noted that there was an overall FTE increase for regulatory services. However, there's a 4% budget cut for the housing inspection services specifically. So wanting to, I guess, hadn't heard much if that was something that groups were working on already, and maybe if anybody is familiar with this, what this might mean for renters, if there's that budget cut for the housing inspectors specifically. And then the last note here is about the American Rescue Plan Act, that there's $50 million in funding that the city has remaining. What we had heard is that there are no specific benchmarks for how much funding will be allocated by focus area, but that there will be an opportunity to provide feedback once the second round proposal has come out. And that was also the Mentimeter polling feature that we had asked to be sent out. And maybe I'll turn it back over to Scott to kind of explain the polling feature and let us know what the results are like. We had asked people to indicate kind of their, how they would rank the priorities among the 5 previously identified housing focus areas. I don't know, to see if there was any kind of consensus amongst our group in terms of how we would prioritize those areas as a committee. Oh, sorry, Andrea?
I was just going to answer one of the questions that I could answer right now, if that's all right, if now's a good time to do that. In terms of the community engagement specialist, that is a position that will be that will live in regulatory services. It was a proposal from them, so it's part of the overall housing inspection team that that includes the housing liaisons, and so it's to collaborate with the work that they're doing, and also specifically focus on some of the larger portfolios that we do encounter sometimes where someone owns a lot of buildings and there are problems, and so it's somebody who can focus specifically on some of that more larger portfolio work. In terms of and then I'll let Kelly jump in because she's the expert when it comes to that actual work.
Yeah, and so I was actually not familiar with this. I didn't lose any staff this year particularly. I think it could be sort of a adjustment or a budget adjustment, although I did talk, I mean, I'll have to ask my budget manager, but I was not aware of any cut to staffing. It may just be a way that it's structured. So like we had to do hiring freezes and other things last year, so it may just be sort of an adjustment that looks like it, but I didn't lose any staff. Like, I didn't have to cut any staff positions. I didn't get any additional staff, but I didn't lose staff. So, and then I want to say, yes, the community engagement specialist is in regulatory services, specifically to work with the portfolio inspections and to try to do more engagement with renters in prior to sort of doing licensing inspections, and to working with our liaison team to do more front end engagement that way. And then also to work with, to partner with our energy folks in environmental health to make sure renters are aware of some of the new energy I can't think of the word, but energy preservation ordinances or conservation stuff that protects renters. So, but I need to dig a bit deeper to find out how that 4% budget cut, what that's reflecting.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think that's my understanding as well. We didn't, and there was no FTE cut to housing inspection services. So I'm thinking it's probably a timing, one of those budget pieces. If I may, I'll also just mention right to counsel. I think the way you summarized it, Rose, is accurate. The Hennepin County has recently ramped up their services as well, that they're providing directly for legal representation. And I know the collaborative of groups that work on that have been working with Katie really closely to put together what does it look like what do we think it's going to look like, which, you know, as we're coming out of the eviction moratorium in the pandemic, it's still a lot of educated guesses about what we're going to need. So I can say we are very interested from the mayor's office in moving forward an ARP proposal that will make sure that we're not falling off a cliff on March of 2022 with that services. We want to make sure that we're continuing to provide that. And since we are coming out of the eviction moratorium from the pandemic, it is a very clear eligible use for ARP funds. And so that is something that we are definitely considering as we go through that round of deliberation.
Great, that's super helpful. Thank you both for those clarifications. And I'll turn to you, Scott.
Yeah. So Rose, you brought up the Mentimeter poll that I put together and was sent out with the agenda and minutes. And it's just super quick. I've gotten 4 responses, I think, including my own on it, but it takes like minute and a half. And so it's basically you rank the 5 subcategories of housing that the city has defined. And so it's housing stability for low-income renters and homeowners, support for persons experiencing homelessness, reducing racial disparities in home ownership, creating new low barrier and affordable housing, and emergency support for low-income renters and homeowners. And so you just rank those 1 to 5, and I'll send the results to Andrea and back to the rest of the group, so that they have that information as they prepare the round 2 proposal.
Hey, Scott, I just want to add to that. I did see that, but I was hoping that I would have saw all of the above, because I think all of those will play in the factor to help protect some of those things. So that's what I think. I think it should have been all of the above, because I think they were all great points, but I think all of that on that thing matters. So.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's no other questions on this, we can move on to some potential recommendations that the 3 of us thought of, but certainly leaving lots of space to hear from the whole committee as well. Want to lift up that we support the investment in public housing, and especially the deeply affordable. We know that there is a huge backlog of deferred maintenance there, and the city can't obviously do that by itself, but we just want to applaud the investment and seeing that that's in this year and next year as well. That's great. And then the community engagement specialist as well, just deepening the opportunities for communication, navigation support, kind of making sure that people are aware of what their rights are. Super great, super cool. Glad to see that in budget. The second area we would recommend be increases either kind of through the budget itself or as a use of ARPA funds. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund, especially prioritizing deeply affordable housing. There's always many more applications than can get funded through the trust fund, so we would love to see some of the ARPA funds be used there. Similarly, again, back to Minneapolis Public Housing, just continuing to invest there in that deeply affordable housing, preserve those opportunities, address some of that deferred maintenance, make sure it's safe and high quality. Fully funding that right to counsel that we've been talking about, and other eviction prevention measures, and then continuing to prioritize shelter funding and support for our homeless neighbors, again, either through the budget or with those ARPA funds. The prioritization survey we just talked about, so we don't need to spend any more time on that. And then just other items for discussion, kind of that rental housing inspector thing that Rose mentioned. Again, that had been a priority and a concern for a lot of community groups last year. Wondering trying to get a pulse on what folks are thinking about it this year, if that's still a concern, if we're hoping to see more housing inspectors, again, for kind of the safety and quality concerns. And then just other areas of importance that the committee wants to lift up and make sure makes it into a recommendation. Folks have any thoughts, questions, concerns, kind of areas that they want to make sure that this committee is commenting on?
This is Queen. I would really like to see more, if there's possible, more departments like NCR, Neighborhood Community Relations. I know that we just spoke about having rec services have more engagement opportunities and navigators and stuff like that for people and renters and spaces available so that we can really have people engaged, or more material that we could pass out in the communities to let renters know some of these resources are available. And if we could make those opportunities accessible so that people could have equal access and equal opportunities, I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Does anyone hate any of these recommendations or disagree or don't want to see this committee comment on any of these?
Well, I'll just say I agree that I think that I agree with these that are listed here. A couple questions I had, or other pieces I was just going to add. I think so. Our last estimate for right to counsel would be that for the city of Minneapolis to provide right to counsel for all Minneapolis families facing eviction. It's hard, as was mentioned. We don't know what the eviction numbers are going to look like, but if you're looking at like 2019 as the most recent, non-COVID affected year, based on the numbers of filings in 2019, our best estimate for what it would cost would be somewhere in like the $1.5 to $1.75 million a year for the city of Minneapolis to provide attorneys for families facing eviction. So I just wanted to share that point, just to put that in context for how much, our legal aid estimate that it might cost. It's sort of a back of the napkin estimate, but that's what we have. And then, definitely, I think just substantively want to share that we're very concerned about health and safety issues in people's rental properties. We know that there's been a decrease in complaints to 311 during COVID for, we can kind of presume why there might be reasons why renters weren't trying to call the city on their landlord when maybe they were behind on rent or who knows. But we, certainly a priority for us. Besides eviction defense, it's the number one thing. It's the next biggest thing that we do, often in tangent with eviction cases, is health and safety hazards in rental properties. So not making a specific recommendation here, but just that is, sometimes inspections can seem sort of like clinical, but they really are meaningful when it comes to helping renters enforce their rights to health and safe homes. So I would defer to Kelly on, her team of what, she feels, what you feel, Kelly, is needed in order to really meet the need. I know that there's, because of lack of resources, like that comes up, right? Of the lack of resources and being able to get into as many homes as you and we all would like to have eyes on. So I would just be curious about that. And then I'm sorry if I think I missed where stable home, stable schools fits in here. Sorry if I'm making you repeat. Or if we want to add something about that in this would be a consideration.
Yeah, we didn't have anything specifically about stable home, stable schools. So if folks have thoughts about what I thought I heard from the presentation earlier was that the budget was less of an issue, but if that's wrong, or if there are things you want to recommend about that, we can definitely include that.
This is Queen again. I would just say that I don't think there's a lot of people that get that information. What school your kid goes to can affect if you get services for stable homes, stable schools. So again, I think that there needs to be more information about that distributed in certain communities so that kids know or parents know what schools have this kind of funding and gives them that kind of help and support. Thank you. I recuse myself.
Ileana, do you have a question? Comment?
I do have a comment. One of the things that we have noticed in the Latinx community living in Minneapolis is that they are, in their long-term planning, they're planning to leave Minneapolis because of safety and security. So is there any funding that is specifically how we're going to increase and create a more safe environment in parks and public places? We are encouraging people to stay in Minneapolis, to purchase home in Minneapolis, but it seems to me that lately they're, for now, okay, but my long-term goal is to get out of Minneapolis due to crime. So is this area going to be budgeted in another bucket, or can this be part of this? Because it's tying to housing.
Yeah, I'm not aware of where that would show up kind of within, we just looked at the housing elements of the budget, and I'm not aware if that shows up in any of those, but if somebody knows differently, please let us know.
I can say the places to look for those investments in the budget are in the health department, which is where the Office of Violence Prevention lives. And then in the Minneapolis Police Department budget, those would be the two places that most sort of directly address public safety. In terms of the housing budget, I think the broader perspective on holistic community development and how that over the long term impacts public safety in a positive way. We definitely see these investments as a move in that direction. But if you're looking for specifically things that address a very direct line to sort of public safety and violence prevention, those are the two places to look for it. And I can provide, I don't have it right now at my fingertips, but we have like a summary of some of those investments that if you're interested in that, I could share that for the committee after the fact.
Thank you.
All right, well, I think that's the last slide, right, Maggie?
It is, yeah. So thank you, everyone. I don't know, Joey, what are next steps here?
Yeah, I'm wondering, actually, sorry to make you do, could you share again, whoever's screen that was, and just maybe keep that slide up of the possible recommendations? I'm wondering, thanks, Scott. So, maybe if at this point it would just make sense if anyone has a motion for either recommending, adopting these recommendations or these with an amendment, that could be just how we decide whether we're going to formally comment as a committee. So again, like this would be going to, it would go to the mayor's office, but it would be going to city council to recommend, since the ball is sort of in their court next, to make, the whatever amendments to the budget as they're hearing from community and discussing in committee. So I think that would be the thing is, does anybody have a motion? When we did this last year, and Rose, I know you were a big part of that too, we kind of voted on one at a time. So I guess the two options would be, we could vote one at a time on pieces of this or additional recommendations that people have, or alternatively, if somebody wanted to make a motion that had kind of a multifaceted recommendation, like I would move to approve what's exactly on this slide. We could do it that way and then vote to see where the votes are. I think Cecil, do you have your hands raised? I think.
Yeah. I do. Typically when budgeting is done or modifications, there's a budget to the budget amendment. Do we have dollar figures attached to these items? And the other part of the budgeting is, where is the source coming from to pay for that? So have we researched any of that in terms of availability? We can ask for it, but is it realistic?
We did not discuss dollar amounts. I think probably the ARP funds would be a major source for a lot of these. If somebody wants to propose dollar amounts, we certainly could.
So one-time funding.
Am I correct that ARPA dollars can be spent through 2024? And yes, yes, to your point, Cecil, right, it's not, permanent, but it would be those dollars that do carry through 2024.
That's correct, Joy.
My personal opinion, if I could, is I don't know that we have the level of detail and time within capacity within our committee to really dig into those numbers and propose specifics in a way that would make sense. Like, I think we could spend an entire meeting and probably not get on the same page as to where we wanted to go with those numbers. So I don't think that the value of our committee necessarily is to suggest specific budget amendments that city council members could propose on their own, but rather to share what our priorities and, like, more kind of in a general advisory capacity, where we feel that funding should go, and leave the specific budgeting decisions to council and staff personally.
Yeah, I second that. Is there ever a way, this is Karina speaking, is there ever a way that this housing committee can sit with city council when they are discussing things that's, related to housing and budget wise and stuff like that, so that we can all be on the same page? Because most of the calls I am on the phone, so I don't see, like today I just received the graphs and stuff. So if we were to vote, I wouldn't vote on it because I would have to look at it to make some sense of it all. But is it ever a day that we can sit with city council or whoever's, doing all of this, to make sure that we're all on the same page? Because we're making, amendments to this stuff. So I just think that one day that should happen, that this committee and that council is together. Thank you.
Yeah, Karina, I think that's that's a really good idea. I know we do have Robin who's here, city council staff, but something that we could explore is for at our November meeting is inviting, whether it's, Councilmember Palmisano as the chair of the budget committee, or an open invitation to council members and or staff to join us at our November meeting, just since we'll already be convened rather than setting another meeting. Of course, there are a few public hearings set, but those are sort of a one-way, like, speaker piece. But if we're looking for sort of a conversation, committee leadership and staff, we could explore maybe inviting council members or their staff to our November meeting, if that's something that people would like.
This is Queen. I want to
really
make a comment.
to help us.
I would like to make a comment. This is Queen. So the first thing I would say, I'm asking, is Cam Gordon still part of the housing committee for the city council? Robin, do you know that answer? Is Robin still on the phone?
If Robin's not still here, I could take a crack at answering what I think you're asking, Queen. So in the because of the pandemic, the committee structure at the city was condensed, and so there is no longer a standalone. Was the housing development committee. Now the housing work at the committee level at the council is embedded within the business inspections housing and zoning committee. Councilmember Gordon is a member of that committee. That it's chaired by Councilmember Goodman and Vice Chair Councilmember Schrader, and then the other members are Councilmember Gordon, Councilmember Ellison, Councilmember Osmond, and Councilmember Reich. I think I got everybody. But that is the Business Inspections Housing and Zoning Committee that now takes up the housing items in the council.
Okay, because I also sit on the NRP board as well, but I'm gonna go back a little bit, please, with me. So the reason why I'm saying this is because I think that I have not kind of addressed another issue that I think is important, and that's the vacant and aborted houses that are given to other developers and not given first rights of refusals to residents that live in the community. And I would, I kind of, like some of the other members here, I'm kind of not wanting to put a vote forward unless we kind of consider all those factors of housing that could be expanded upon for low wealth earning people to kind of capture some of these other housings and do some development work in that area. And I think that's not even added here. So those are my comments and thoughts. Thank you.
Maggie, I don't know if you prefer to kind of look for hands, or do you want me to? I'm fine either way.
Sure, go for it. Cecil and then Rose.
Yeah, Rose raises an interesting point. If we're not going to do the deep dive or even put dollar figures on here, then one thing we should at least try and attempt to do is prioritize, because the more we add to this list, the more we dilute our voice and our impact on the budget, because then it's just, well, we heard you and we just picked this from the list that you gave us. And so, to have a conversation about what are the priorities. Is it deeply affordable housing? I've heard that over and over again this year about the priority of deeply affordable housing. But are there opportunities because of the ARPA funding to say, okay, well, if there's ARPA funding on the table and housing is a priority, then let's prioritize those elements in the budget. I think the more you, and our Queen has added, some other points, and to have a discussion about what are the priorities means that we can emphasize some things versus providing a laundry list and then we haven't really put our thumb on the scale anywhere.
Rose, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just did have a comment about timing. So I think last time, we put together a comment and we submitted it in writing and not as part of the public hearing, but prior to the public hearing. So just wanted to note that the public hearing, I believe, and maybe Andrea can correct me if I'm wrong, is Wednesday, December 1st. And so we do have, I don't know what is on the agenda for the November meeting yet, but we do have one meeting in between this conversation and the budget hearing. If we wanted to submit something before the public comment, we would still have time to discuss any kind of changes or revisions or a draft letter. I guess there would be time. I'm not sure if there is time on the agenda, but there is chronological time, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I can just speak to that since I'm involved with setting the agendas. The November agenda is not set, so we could absolutely make time in our November meeting if, however, we wanted to do this. If it was some folks doing some work, I think in the meantime, and then coming back to put together more specific recommendations in November, that we could absolutely make that happen with regard to this committee's agenda. For those city staff folks, do you have thoughts about whether timing wise, I know the public hearing, there's public hearing into December, but do you feel like that timeline is still works with like the timeline upon which the council members are really considering their amendments? Or what would be your recommendation to us to make sure our recommendation is, useful?
I think Andrea, you or Robin, if he's still on the call, would be the best to answer that.
My calendar just froze. I was trying to see. So right now what's happening in the structure, and I can't speak to the council members and what their timeline would be in terms of consideration of amendments, but I can talk to generally the timeline and the structure. Right now what's happening in the process is the budget committee is meeting and they are taking departmental presentations. So each of the departments presents their change items that are in the budget to the budget committee, and that's happening right now. What I was trying to determine was when the last one of those is, when my calendar froze. It looks like the last one of the budget committee meetings is like the end of October. So they usually happen around this time. So those meetings will be finished the end of October, and then between the end of those meetings and the public hearing is when the council members generally start to put together their thoughts and questions and amendments. And the first public hearing is on November 16th. That's the one that happens in the afternoon. And then the one that Rose mentioned is a second public hearing, which is in the evening on December 1st. And then after that, the markup is where the council members actually present their amendments, and that happens on December 3rd. So I would recommend closer to the first public hearing than the second in terms of making sure you're getting it in ahead of when council members are formulating what their markups are going to be.
That's super helpful. And I did just peek. It looks like this body, our committee here, our November meeting is scheduled for November 18th, slightly later. I'm guessing it's because of the Veterans Day holiday, I'm guessing is what shifts
yes,
it
that's right.
a week later. So November 18th would be when we will reconvene. So it sounds like would still be in time for it to be considered. Yeah.
And I'll just add in terms of, since we have been talking about the ARP process, we don't have a timeline yet on that in terms of exactly when. We're in the middle of the conversations right now in terms of getting feedback from staff departments. But once we do have that timeline available, we can send that along. But that will be a adjacent process to the budget in some manner. And so as the timeline for when the mayor's proposal is going to come out on that, I can definitely make sure that you guys know. And so as some of these recommendations are helpful to go into that process as well, that we're lining up the timing there.
That's helpful. Cecil, is your hand, I think your hand's back up, right?
No, I took my hand down.
Oh, sometimes it was showing up for me. Sometimes Teams, I feel like there's a weird lag or something. So sorry about that.
Yep.
Well, one thing we could do is, between, Rose and Maggie and Scott and the co-chairs and staff, we could put together like basically like what you use the ranking poll, the Mentimeter thing. We could maybe make a more detailed one of those that includes some of these things so that we could then, our recommendation could then maybe be a little bit more nuanced rather than, as was brought up, just a list of things that we think should be supported or emphasized that maybe we could. I mean, I think that data would be the most useful if all of us, or as many of us as possible, participated to really show like where kind of when push, like we could say twofold, we think all of these things are important. We don't think any of these things should be decreased. And here's where our committee members stand as far as prioritization. I know it's hard because it's a little bit apples and oranges, right? Because different things cost different amounts of money. So it's not like you have $10. What do you want to spend the $10 on? It's, well, we want to spend maybe $4 here and $2 here. And so I get the desire for dollar amounts, but I also agree that we probably aren't the body with the expertise on, saying really specific dollar amounts. I don't know, for the folks that worked on this, do you all feel like that would be possible for us to put together a little bit more of a detailed, whether it's a poll that goes out to folks beforehand or it's something we do in our November meeting? Do you think that would be possible?
Yeah, I think so. I think it would be helpful to have something for folks to react to, and then we could kind of have a finalized draft or list or whatever that we could vote on next time. Makes sense to me.
So maybe what I will suggest is if people, if committee members have items that they would put forward to either be in this support or support or increase funding, things you want to add. I know Queen, you mentioned, there are a few other things were added. If you could submit those via email to, one of us, will make sure it gets to everybody, but either to the co-chairs or to Maggie, Scott, and Rose, so that they're at least included in whatever, poll or thing that we put together. So if you could email those like within the next week or two, that would be really helpful. And then we'll plan to put something a little bit more detailed together as a team in advance of our November meeting.
Okay. All right. Certainly will. And we're all on the same email roll, right?
Yeah. So you should have just gotten a couple emails this afternoon with like the materials. You can reply to those, or you can, yeah. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Good enough for a plan? Any other thoughts or final comments? I know we're almost at time. All right. Again, thanks so much to the group that put this together and for taking the extra time to dig into it and share with us. And thanks everyone for the meeting today. Again, next meeting is November 18th. So just check your calendar. It's a little bit later in the month. And still remote, right, Kelly? There's no way we're.
Yeah, we're not. We've heard no indication otherwise. I think we would know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see you all here in this virtual space, November 18th. Take care, everybody. Thanks
Okay,
for
thank
coming.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Good night, everyone.